The devastation and destruction that came about as a result of Hurricane Katrina in the US, it's pretty widely known. But now we get the Apple TV Plus miniseries 5 Days at Memorial, which takes a detailed look at what went down in a major hospital when the disaster occurred. 5 Days at Memorial chronicles the impact of Hurricane Katrina and its aftermath on a local hospital. When the floodwaters rose, power failed, and heat soared, exhausted caregivers at a New Orleans hospital were forced to make decisions that would follow them for years to come. This is based on actual events and then adapted from the book by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Sherry Fink. Now, it's a total of 8 episodes, with the first 3 dropping at once, followed by an episode a week through September 16th. For anyone unfamiliar with Hurricane Katrina, it hit the Gulf Coast of the United States in August of 2005. Now, while New Orleans was spared from the direct hit of Katrina, because the city sits below sea level and then the condition of the levees that hold floodwaters at bay failed, the city flooded, which claimed a lot of lives. There were so many different types of breakdowns in communications, government direction and support, and then really any basic service. I mean, it was truly a disaster. This series focuses on Memorial Hospital in New Orleans, which also housed another private hospital within its walls called Life Care. Now, the show starts out with what looks like an investigation, where people are being questioned about what happened at Memorial during the time of the hurricane. And then we're pretty much thrust right into the action, and then the tension begins to mount as the hurricane is approaching. Now, the show captures the electric nervousness of the people in the hospital, which aren't all patients, but they're residents who've just come to shelter from the storm. Now, obviously, this puts pressure on the entire staff of the hospital, and I love how the tension is shown between the hospital staff as they have differing beliefs and then standards about who should be able to shelter, and then what to do with all of the mounting numbers. This has a pretty large cast with Robert Pine, W. Earl Brown, Cherry Jones, Michael Gaston, Cornelius Smith Jr., and Molly Hager, but the main focus sits on Vera Farmiga as a surgeon within Memorial. Now, each of the casts gets moments where there's the standouts, and I really love the dynamic that each contribute. The fear, anger, frustration, even the despair is palpable as the show goes along, creating some very captivating sequences. Now, the show feels like it's almost 2 different series that are put together. The first 5 episodes are wrought with anxiety. The pace is driving and it's deliberate, building this intensity as the stakes get more and more dire. Now, each of the 5 episodes focuses on one day, so as time goes along, everything becomes more treacherous and then heartbreaking. And episode 5 is extremely devastating. I was riveted and then destroyed right along with the characters. And there's even a point where one character, who up until this point has come across as gruff and unemotional, has this moment of humanity that I found touching. But then the last 3 episodes don't share in this intensity or stress. There's still a lot of story tension, but not to the degree that we experience in the first 5. Each of the episodes are a little less than an hour long, but what's crazy is that the last 3 episodes feel longer than the first 5 combined. There's a considerable shift in the pacing where we've had this mounting pressure and looming devastation, and then that subsides to wade through the aftermath. And I'm not saying the final 3 episodes aren't wonderful to watch, because they are. There's just a distinct difference in the feel of the narrative. Now, I really love how this series raises some great ethical questions. It examines the actions of medical personnel in the midst of a disaster when all services have broken down. Now, knee-jerk reactions are easy to have, and they may even be correct, but the events bring about just a much deeper conversation about compassion and duty. And this series intersperses a lot of real footage from Katrina and the aftermath. Now, sometimes the transitions are jarring and even a little chaotic, but seeing the actual footage does give this more grounding to the events that we watch play out. And we also get audio and video of news reports in the days following the storm, and it's extremely sad to watch this whole breakdown and everything just take place. And the breakdown is also illustrated through the hospital. Communication is key in any crisis, and we watch extremely bad games of telephone take place multiple times as one person relays information to another, but the receiver then augments that info, typically making it seem worse, when then relaying it to the next person. And on this goes until a final message is the worst possible version of how it began. And there are also many scenes where it's hurry up and wait, with decisions being made on little to no information, which then causes all kinds of havoc. The actors confidently display their frustrations and their fears as all of these events play out. Now, there are some graphics, especially in the first episode, that are a bit wonky when it comes to the storm. There are some moments that are just obviously computer generated, so they do lose a bit of the fear or anxiety that should accompany such a force of nature. Aside from that, though, when we see the flooding, it looks convincing. That's helped along because actual footage of the flooding is interspersed as well, giving realism and context to the scenes. The cinematography through the majority of the show, I think, captures the subjects really well, giving us some wonderfully devastating intimate shots where the emotion is just palpable. And most of the time we watch fear and despair, but there are also moments that highlight triumph and relief, and each time I was immersed in the scenes. When all is said and done, 5 Days at Memorial is a heartbreaking looking disaster. The actors create characters that are believable through their flawed humanity. The storytelling is intense and driven, but the show does feel like it's two different styles as it transitions from disaster to investigation. The combination of actual archival footage mixed with production imagery helps to ground this and remind us that events really did occur, and what we're watching, while dramatized, is based on truth. I think this will cause some discussions and make audiences ponder what they might do when faced with this situation, as it's not always a cut and dry answer. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and some very disturbing violence. I give 5 Days at Memorial 4 out of 5 couches. Are there any real events that you'd love to see made into a limited series? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.